Hey gang, Joe here. Just want to let you know this is a great episode, but we talked for quite a while, almost 2 hours. So I am breaking this episode into 2 parts. First one's being released today on Thursday, and the second one will be released on Saturday. So just heads up. All right, let's get into it. Thanks again for listening. This was part 1 of 2. We'll see you on Saturday.
This episode of No Time Like Joe Time is sponsored by Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella. Rena has grown up sheltered and cut off from the world, caring for her ailing mother. When fate catches up with her, she is thrust into a world of magic and intrigue she never knew existed, and the heritage she is not quite sure of. Read Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella.
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where TV gets deep for no reason. I'm Generic Joe, here to say the same thing each time before you listen to an episode. You can find No Time Like Joe Time wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm just that generous and kind of a guy. Please rate, please like, subscribe, and comment, because I'm magic. It also really helps grow the show, and I've loved the conversations I'm having. So maybe you can help your old friend Joe. Now, if you, and I mean just you, want to be a guest, you can email me at notimelikejoetime@gmail.com. Love to have you on, figure out what show you like, and then we'll have a meaningful discussion. All right. Let's get to the episode.
Like what you are listening to? Check out Lazen Low on Spotify Music, a new and upcoming local band from Minnesota.
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where we look at different media clips, even when we are feeling Bluey. We take Arcane meeting out of Thus shows, and I talk to chosen guests to help me talk about Thus clips. Today, I am so excited to welcome my guest. He is the owner of the Creative Continuum, and he just breathes creativity. Please welcome Isaac.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you came on. Actually, I'm so glad you're here. So excited because, after some of our discussion and talking about writing, I decided to write down some ideas that I think would do really great as books. Do you mind if I share them with you?
I love consulting. Let's have at it.
Perfect. Okay. So first book, it's about this island where the guy has found a way to extract like Jurassic dino DNA from mosquitoes, and he clones the dinosaurs. Now, these Jurassic creatures, they are at a park of amusement park, to be more accurate, but they end up breaking out and they just start eating people. I'll call it The Very Bad Idea.
That sounds like a franchise that's made quite a bit of money. It sounds similar to Jurassic Park, so definitely will bring in the cash.
Oh, I thought that sounded familiar. Okay, that's cool. That was just one of many. So this one is better. So this kid becomes friends with this old scientist. We'll call him Doctor for short. And they create this time machine, and they manage to do it through a car. And they go back in time and run into the kids and their parents, and they just have this crazy adventure. And but then the doctor must go back to the future to fix things. I'm going to call it Forget Yesterday. That's Tomorrow.
That sounds like a relatively older film called Back to the Future. I see that they got the line from your synopsis.
Huh. Are you sure? I felt like my idea was a little more original. Look, I don't know how I can write anything when all the good stories have been told.
Well, I think that most of them, if not all of them, have been told. That's a pretty common rule, is that all the stories have been told except for one. and that's your story. So overall, if you're telling your story, you can dress it up however you want. Jurassic Park is just dinosaurs plus amusement park. Back to the Future is just a rom-com with a time travel. So at the end of the day, if you did a time traveling adventure park that was similar to Rick and Morty, I think that you still absolutely telling your personal story would be able to pull on the best parts of those two franchises.
I see. That's great. That makes sense. Okay, so I'd love to do is a theme about fear of sharks. It'll take place in a small town on Maine, a small town out east, and there will be this big shark with big jaws, and he will eat people. And the mayor will be like, "We're not going to shut down the beaches." And there's a sheriff, and he's all like, "Yes, we will." And there's three guys, and they all go in the boat, and I'll call it When Sharks Decide to Be Jerks.
I think that that is always, and I think that they've done a movie for that one as well. Some of them that are done really well by Steven Spielberg's, and other of them that come in a tornado, both in the movie and in terms of how well the production goes.
Ah, got it. So I'll call it like Jaws 5, the zombie shark. That will
As long as it's not on YouTube, I don't know if you'll get any type of copyright strikes.
that's all right. I'll get one. I'll take one for the team.
From producer of No Time Like Joe Time, a YouTube channel nobody has heard of, comes a new film that is totally not Jaws. In a world where sharks have already tasted man, those who venture out are eaten alive by these perfect killing machines. We thought if we just stayed out of the water, we would be safe. But we were wrong. 'Cause there are zombies. What happens when you cross a zombie and a shark? The most terrifying shark in history. Prepare for not Jaws, the zombie shark that is not related to the sci-fi movie. Coming next year.
And yeah, that feels like a good finish. Dumb. I love it. Thank you for doing that with me. I liked how you described all those movies. Like one thing well, I like that. Well, you simplified them in a really good way. Like Jurassic Park, dinosaurs in a theme park. Yeah. And, or like, Back to the Future is just a rom-com with time travel. I'm like, that's great. I do like, I want to get your take on this saying. So yeah. I once heard the saying, good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yeah. So when I work on a narrative, I divide up into 3 parts: world, character, and story. Okay. And what we were talking about earlier was some of the mental health stuff, but also what I do in branding. My overall story structure, it's very character based. It talks about how you have a character who goes through 7 stages. Each of those stages have 5 parts. Each of those parts have 7 beats. Yeah. And so you kind of get this idea that every single aspect of character is relatively the same. And I think that that's based on 3 principles. So the underlying, like unconscious that we go through, is just what it means to be human. Then we have the general side of us that's divided up by like the Myers-Briggs typing indicator and other personality traits. And that's what groups us. And then our memories are what make us unique. And so when you utilize, what I said about telling your story, it's your memories put into a fiction, but still following what it means to be human. So then when we're talking about, world building, world builders are the most fun and obnoxious people in the world, because they love to just spout out all this type of stuff. And, you know, game designers are very similar. When I was working in transmedia, my boss was like, this is like no concept that you've ever seen before. I'm like, oh, your poor marketing team, they are so screwed. So, you know, it's one of those things where the first thing you want to do is you want to be like, what couple of things would be fun? And what couple, you don't want to use a lot of tropes in your story, but using a lot of tropes in your world building is probably a good idea. And then start the world building process. Give yourself a place to start.
Yeah, I love that. And I like one thing that I'm kind of thinking about as you're talking about it. So one actor I really like, John C. Reilly, who was Dr. Cox from Scrubs. And he has, when he talks about acting, he's like, you know, people can tell if you're bull crapping, like you have to be invested. So I feel like that's kind of where you have to be with the story. Like you can't just be like, okay, well, I think here's a trope that would be good. Like just to make a story, like you have to believe in it for it to be something special.
Well, you know, and that's kind of the weird dynamic, is that you do live in it. You're living in your life. Your life is a story, right? You know, I told you about that app that I want to utilize for mental health and basically kind of a life coaching system. It's not some special fancy therapy program like it's supposed to be, but it pulls from narratology. It pulls from the idea that the stories that we write are the stories that we live through first and foremost, and then fantasize, so that it's not as I don't want to say not as boring, because there's a lot of slice of life things that people enjoy, but you know, that definitely have the most meaningful parts pulled out and then put into something that seems really cool.
Yeah. And then I think with that, it's also really cool when you find people who kind of see the world similarly. One of my highlights in my job in the last couple of weeks is I was walking with one of the people I work with, and we were talking about high school was kind of rough for both of us. And I was like, you know, I'm like, I've never been to a prom, because both of my prom, junior and senior year, when there was prom, I just stayed at home, played Star Wars of the Knights of Old Republic. And he was like, I did too. And it was like this amazing bonding experience where it's like, what? So yeah, one thing I love about this podcast is just I meet so many wonderful people, and just everybody I've come across is so passionate about something, and it's so inspiring, you included. And
thank you.
One of the people who I talked to, she has a podcast for indie musicians, for like people who are kind of new, because she's like, it's so hard to get into it. So to have somebody who can give you resources, connections, like, I'm just like, yeah. So just to have that for somebody who's trying to tell a story, I think that's so cool.
Well, you know, and it's funny because I did go to my prom, and I'm a very like flexible individual. It's weird because on a large scale, on a small scale, like if you and I were to hang out, I'd be like, yeah, whatever you want to do. I'm here to hang out with you. I'm here to be flexible. I'm here to have fun. Yeah. But then when it comes down to like big issues, I'm like a huge control freak.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what, mental health issues, I'm going to fix all of it. So I'm very much divergent on that part.
Yeah.
But you know, in the 80s, when people who didn't have the same physical fortitude as sports players were ganged up on and abused, there was a lot of grouping of those types of people who would gather together and share in things they enjoyed. I grew up, and I hate this word, so I'm going to say it and then probably throw up in my mouth a little bit. I grew up in a relatively sheltered environment. And you know, I would go out, I would hang out, I would hang out with my friends, we'd play video games, we'd play basketball. It was kind of a nice little mixture. It wasn't very authentic. And so, you know, for me, I don't really feel like I got to engage with that same level of nerdiness. I've yet to play a D&D game. I have, you know, I've played a lot of video games, but I haven't done any LARPing. I'd like to do that. I'd like to meet people like that. And boo-hoo me, I wasn't bullied enough growing up. but I did miss kind of that forging of that
Yeah.
nerdiness side that I really wish I had.
Yeah, totally. I get that. I'm fortunate. I've got a D&D group who we play quite frequently. And yeah, I actually had a manager who was the last person I'd ever expect who LARPed. It was like we couldn't tell if he was messing with us. We're like, no, come on, seriously. He's like, no, I like it. And we're like, okay, bit's over. And he's like, no, here's some pictures. We're like, just like
Whoa.
person. Yeah, you were kind of talking about friends and like connections. And I'm wondering, like, growing up, have you had any friends that maybe you lost touch with, but then came back and met up with them again?
Okay. This is where things are going to go completely ballistic on you. Okay.
Excellent.
Good, 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 good. I was born when I was 12 years old. I was born with a severe heart defect, and the doctor destroyed one of my nervous systems, and I was stuck with a pacemaker. And as such, the very first official memory that I have is waking up in the hospital when I was 12 years old. I don't remember
Oh,
anything before that.
wow.
As far as I know, I don't have any of that. I have memories of like architecture and memories of things like that. But I like to tell people I identify as a cyborg, and internet captchas are super offensive.
Yeah.
But I had that. First memory was when I was 12.
Wow.
When I was 15, I had a relationship end in a very traumatic way.
Yeah.
There was a whole freaking conspiracy theory on it, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, like in the least bit. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, leave me out of the news, please. It was like a
Mm.
whole conspiracy theory, and it very much showed me. It opened up my world of, you really have to be careful on who you trust.
Yeah.
And that was really my first brush with depression and suicide, both
Mm.
for me, but then also for others that I connected with.
Yeah.
And I lost everyone and everything. And
Mm.
so I ended up changing schools, changing my name, changing everything. And it got to the point to where I kind of had started developing new connections, but I never really got over that previous trauma. And
Mhm.
that trauma came back and completely crushed me again.
Mm.
I ended up having a couple kids, and my middle kid had so many medical issues that it made it difficult to keep up with anyone, even the people who I probably needed to keep up with the most. And
Mm.
I tried to make new connections, mostly online. I was too busy to do anything in person. And throughout all that time, I continued my research into narratology. I was looking for that cure for depression.
Mm.
And then a few years ago, that middle child ended up passing away, and it's a
Oh,
whole new set of traumas.
I'm so
Um,
sorry to hear that.
it is, I'm okay right now on camera because I'm able to modulate my memories. I'm able to completely have control over the timeline that I'm in. Like, I
Yeah.
live moments, past, present, and future, all at the same time. I have memories that are mine but are not mine.
Yeah.
And so I can modulate all of this information. And it's been incredibly helpful
Mm.
in the way that I see story and the way that
Yeah.
I see all these other things. And so, putting together things that I'm currently working on selling these branding classes. And
Mhm.
after I'm done with that, I'm going to start work on what the Creative Continuum actually is, which is a piece of AI software that
Yeah.
is there so that you can type out whatever you want, creatively speaking. It'll help you organize it, write a book, make a movie, make a TV
Wow.
show. Just give a space for creative people to come in and really be able to make whatever they want, make money off of it, the whole nine yards. And so that's
Yeah.
step number one. Step number two is going after depression. Step number
Mhm.
three is I'm writing this book, my magnum opus, because after I'm done with this, I'm never writing another book ever again. But it is, how do you take my structure and apply it to creativity, business, communication, influence, sociology, mental health, education, and spirituality, right? Same
Mhm.
thing, but run over the course. So, in terms of what you said of like, have you ever had any friends you've lost touch with and then reconnected with? I've lost touch with everyone over the years.
Mm.
And I'm going to need help in a lot of the plans that I have, partially in some of the ones I've told you, partially in some of the ones I haven't. And so I'm going to develop that. But for me, mentally speaking, I don't necessarily know if I am even a full person. I can modulate my memories. I'm here as trying to solve these issues. I'm more of like a plot device than a
Yeah.
character at this point.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it, you know, I don't hate it. But
Yeah.
I would like to figure out what being me actually means.
Mm.
But it's not going to happen until I'm done with any of this other stuff. And I
Yeah.
am a very vain individual. Like I'm
Mm.
kind, I'm considerate, I'm nice, but I am very vain. And I definitely want to be the best at something. And narratology is like a field that's so small. I'm like, I can be the best at that without
Yeah.
hurting anyone's feelings. But you know, I'd like to go back
Yeah.
and show off. And I know that it
Yeah.
won't mean anything to anyone except for me. And I hate that that's my darker side. Like I recognize that that's my darker side. You know, and I definitely have not integrated with my shadow by any means. But I don't know what my personal life is going to look like after
Mm.
I'm done with all this insanity. You know, it'll be entertaining. If nothing else, it'll be entertaining.
Yeah, definitely. So that reminds me kind of there's a song by a band I like called AJR, and it's
Okay.
called The Maybe Man. And it kind of is like, I wish I was a rock, or I wish I was stoned so I wouldn't feel when you yelled at me, but I miss the way you made me feel when we made up. And
Yeah.
it keeps going. Like I wish I was, you know, my dog, because then I'd always be happy when you came home, but then I wouldn't live very long. I'm gonna miss her when she's gone. And
Yeah.
then
That's cool.
the end is, I guess I'll be me, whoever that is.
That's fun.
And it's just this idea of like, we don't know who we are always. And it's like you're trying to put on these different hats to figure out who am I? And that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, is because growing up, I saw my world through the lens of TV. TV is what
Yes.
made me make sense of the world.
Yeah.
So
90% of my text messages to people are definitely gifts.
yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you know, I've got 7 stories in my system, or 7 segments, and they are trust, agency, play, validation, identity, intimacy, and generativity. I'm working on 2 more. There'll be like integrity and then transcendence. I forget what that one is, but they're not ready yet. And even when I do finish them, I don't think that they need to be a part of things where we are culturally.
Sure.
But that identity story took me the longest to figure out. And I still don't even know if I've got it completely worked out.
Right. Definitely. Same boat. So I think
not even my identity, just identity in general.
Oh, got it. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Looking at it as a bigger issue, if I'm hearing you right, like kind of just what is identity? Like,
yeah. And you know, the way that I've kind of understood it, because I use Abraham Maslow's needs, Eric Erickson's values, like I pull from a bunch of different places, but each story is a conflict, or is a need, conflict, resonance, connection, and value. So for the identity, it's you need to understand who you are. And there's kind of several ways to see that. Way number 1 is ikigai, right? That's kind of a very business way to say it. What could you make money off of? What do you like? What are you good at? What helps the world? But then you can also see it as, what is my story, right? If you look back at all the other things, trust is about, you know, having someone who can help you be yourself. Agency is about making choices. Play is about finding a sense of purpose through what you're good at. Validation is about validating yourself and saying, I'm confident to do this. And that's kind of the identity, is like, I figured out what I'm good at. Now, how can I take this and make this a part of who I am?
Yeah.
And I think the hard part is that each individual story that you have is one part of a collection. So your romantic story is different from your work story. It's different from your school story. So when we see identity, we're trying to get this huge grasp on it. But I think the first step is just ripping it to shreds and saying, hey, this is my identity here. This is my identity here. I don't have an identity here. But you can still feel confident enough when you break it down like that to know the parts of who you are, and then the parts that you need to reach.
Yeah. I like that. I kind of like that. I don't know why this connected with me, but it's kind of we're going off format a little bit than what we normally do on Joe Time, which I love. Uh, and usually we pick one show and we take two clips. This time we've got three clips from three different shows, and I kind of like the idea of like there's this version of what's going on, there's this version, and then there's another version, and then once we kind of talk about all of that, we'll bring it all together. But just kind of that idea of like, yeah, like this is who I am at work. This is who I am as a husband. This is who I am as a father. This is who I am as a dungeon master and DM.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of also bringing that all together to figure out who you are totally.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, what is your history with our first clip, Bluey? Like, when did you start watching Bluey, and what kind of drew you to this show?
So we don't use a lot of TV. I've never been a big TV fan. I've always been a gamer growing up. So
Nice.
a lot of places have like that nerd section. That's never been for me because I'm always like diving through the nerd section to look
Yeah.
specifically for the gaming stuff. But you know, the TV was on. So I don't even remember exactly. I think we were traveling, so it was on at a hotel, and it showed Bluey, and it was really cool. And I'm a, you know, I had Disney Plus, and so we looked it up, and you know, we've loved every episode.
Yeah.
And there's a gigantic following for it, but we just saw it on TV, and then we got invested into it every time new episodes pop up on Disney Plus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of along our story where I don't know why we put it on at first, but it captured us right away. And just like the humor and it's such a, my kids love it. I have two young 8-year-old and now a 9-year-old, and they love it. My wife and I love it. It's like one of the few shows where I'm like, yeah, let's watch Bluey. It's great.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, the clip that you're going to play is not quite from this episode, or from the episode I'm about to talk about.
Oh,
but
yeah.
you know, one of my favorites is the cricket episode where it talks about, you know, the boy who like practices and all these different environments and, you know, overcomes all these little conflicts, and the adults are trying to figure out what's going on, and everyone's just excited. But they do a really good job really bringing everything together, especially that end bit where they show kind of the ghost of his future self walking out there.
Yeah. So many good episodes. It was, when we have such good shows to talk about, I'm like, which clips do I use? So,
well, this one is one of my favorite Bluey moments.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. We'll share this, we'll watch it, and we'll touch base about it afterwards.
Mum, you know where Jean-Luc is? His tent's not there.
Oh, yes, I saw them packing up.
What?
They must have left early this morning.
You mean they're gone?
I'm afraid so, sweetheart. Change can be difficult, but it's how we grow. It can be the hardest thing to realize you can't hold on to something forever. Sometimes you have to let it go. But of the things you let go, you'd be surprised what makes its way back to you.
Such a short, sweet clip.
Before that clip happened, you got to see them interacting, and right beforehand, right, they show them playing through the day, and then they're planning the next day. But the darker blue character is French, and they were just on vacation, and Bluey was just in the habit of these people, of her friends showing up time and time again.
Yeah.
But because of the language barrier, that last day, they were leaving, and he was trying to say, I think it's Jean is his name. I'm not sure. It's Jean or Jacques or something like that. Started with a J. And he's like, no, I'm not coming back. But Bluey couldn't understand and just rushed off. And so, you know, you kind of sense what's about to happen,
Yeah.
and then it happens.
Yeah. Totally. And I just, so many things I like about that. And I like, this is where I have too many thoughts. I have to just pick one. I like the mom's kind of narrative of
Mhm.
like, it's tough for change because when you realize you can't always control things.
Yeah.
Uh, that's powerful. I mean, especially when you're seeing them grow up. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's kind of, I feel like, as a dad, that's kind of how I feel like as kids, the older they get, I know like the less, not like control in a bad way, but um influence I'm going to have on them. They're going to
Yeah.
start going towards friends, and one day they'll move out,
Yeah.
and that'll be tough. And just those lessons with friends too, because my youngest is 6, and he was telling us, he's like, I don't want to go to first grade. And we're like, why? He goes, well, my friend Marcus he's not going to come to this school next year. And he was just like heartbroken about it. And it was like opening that discussion, like, yeah, sometimes people leave.
Yeah.
And that's
And it's funny because Bluey's cousin, Muffin,
yeah.
is, that's Stripe. So Bandit's the dad, Stripe is the uncle, and his daughter Muffin is just such a brat. And it's funny because in later episodes you get to see Muffin kind of growing up,
Yeah.
but still maintain that attitude. And Bluey's so familiar with it that they're like, I know Muffin, I'm just borrowing it, like giving Muffin the
Yeah.
reassurances to get away with what he
Yes.
should be not having an issue getting away with at all. And so you get that, change, but then you get the things that stay the same, and then you get the return,
I like that. Yeah. That's I just started seeing it. I don't know if this is a new episode, but this is the second time I'm like, oh, we've seen a grown-up Bluey. I've seen it once before, but I don't know if it's.
I think that this clip is the first time. I know there's a few episodes I haven't gotten around to watching yet. They're relatively new. They popped up in April, including a movie. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that there's the ghost of the grown-up cricket player.
Yeah.
But that's the last one that I saw, I think.
Yeah, it might have been the movie one. I'm not sure. 'Cause I just recently saw it, but yeah, I kind of like when TV shows do that, especially with like animation, where you do kind of get a glimpse of the future of like, oh, who are they going to be?
I'm not a big sitcom fan by any
Yeah.
means, just because I'm a big fan of narratives that flow a lot more.
Yeah.
But there's one called Parks and Rec.
Yes.
That the last episodes of that one kind of do a flash forward, which is, a nice summary.
Yeah.
Of everything that happened so far.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great series, great ending. We loved it.
Yeah.
I also just, there's a lot of people in my life as I've gotten older, who like I look back on, I'm like, it was so fun to connect with that person, and like I don't see him anymore. But thanks to social media and so forth, I've been able to connect with a lot of them. I mean, there's a few people who I've been able to connect with who we've gone years, and now we see each other every month, and that joy and understanding of sometimes things run their course, and sometimes those things come back to you.
I grew up in a very conservative household.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of, for me, I grew up on fantasy, right? And I love fantasy. And I'm a narratologist. I study story. I know how to put together a good story. And so, I fully recognize that fantasy does not have the greatest track record. It is awful. It is cheesy, and I love every moment of it.
Yeah.
I love the sunny naturist vibe. I love the idea of the good versus evil.
Yeah.
The borderline like Christ-esque figure,
Yeah.
that they pull out. But one of the big things for me is this idea of the true love forever, happily ever after. And fact is that even, you get a lot of the Disney princesses, everyone lived happily ever after is garbage. You get a lot of that. And sure, you have conflict in relationships and stuff, but there's still a reality of people being together for their entire lives. And that's definitely fun and desired. But as I've studied story and as I've kind of seen, hey, you can have a story that is about an individual or an idea or a relationship. It's been interesting to kind of study both in terms of narrative and in real life, the overarching idea that, hey, you can have someone who's there for the rest of your life, no questions asked. Or there's people who are in for romantic relationships might only be there for a little bit, and then you grow apart, and then you find somebody else, and that trauma is hard. But it is something to where I don't have the answer to this, but I wonder if maybe just in the way that story is run, right? Not necessarily the way a society is run, but at least in the way that story is run, if it isn't better to have that idea going forward. I mean, that trauma is definitely not good, but it's been a weird thought process that I've had because it goes against everything that I've grown up believing and everything that still deep down inside I believe, but the evidence is there, which has been weird to see.
Yeah. I love that you study story because I do think everything like media there, we can look deeper at what's actually going on and learn from it. And I think you can do that with, I mean, me and a friend covered on here Robot Chicken, which is the most random show in the history, but we took really good lessons away from it. And so I like that idea of like just thinking through these stories and like, well, you said it way better than I could ever try.
It took me a long time to get there, and I really want to be, in my vanity, like the person who cracks this code, but I'm going to be even more excited when someone smarter than me comes along, takes what I've done and pulls it further than I could ever possibly hope to imagine. Because it's fun, it's nerdy, it's like the only thing on the planet I'm good at. I've got all these categories I branch into, and people are like, "Oh, you know so much." I'm like, "No, I know one thing. I'm making the rest up as I go along." So,
Yeah. No, that's very cool. It does remind me what you're saying of like, hey, I want to be the best. This has a very small group. There's a YouTuber I watch called Curtis Connor, and he wanted to beat a game record. And all the games he wanted to do, he's like, there's no way. So he looked and looked, and he found there was a golf game for like the PlayStation that had only one person who did a record on it. And so it took him like 3 months, but he got it. He got the new record because there's only one person to compete with.
That's yes. That's a great way to go.
But it was,
and I teach these branding classes, right? So branding is currently the first one that I want to go on. And everyone in branding will talk about having a strategy, a positioning strategy. And a part of that is how do you differentiate yourself. I don't like teaching this because I can't pronounce it, but also because I don't believe on it. But it's like, hey, Star Wars does not spend half the movie telling you not to watch Star Trek. They just focus on Star Wars, so you don't need it. But so I very much push against that. But on the rare occasion that like it's Dollar Shave Club is like, hey, guess what? We're doing better than Gillette. I think Hertz also did something like, hey, we're going to do it different than this company. So there's the occasional fun nod that you can push out that does something like this. It's like, I'm going to find this teeny tiny thing that I can do and get everyone excited about that, because people will connect with emotions. If you get really excited about it, so many other people will be. And you can do that for who you are, but occasionally you can do it at a poke for somebody else and have fun with that too.
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of becoming my catchphrase on this show, that with passion, my favorite kind of music is seeing your favorite kind of music through your eyes. When I learn about why you like something, why somebody likes something, to me, there's something so sacred in that moment to be like, oh, this means this to you. And it changes every time. I mean, I've gone to concert where there's songs that I'm like, they're okay. But then the artist tells us why they wrote the song. And then I love it after that.
I feel that completely, because I will absolutely like base my enjoyment of a song entirely based off of the memory that's associated with it. And
Yeah.
so like when I'm just doing my research, like I listen to a whole lot of podcasts, but then when I know that I'm making good memories, I'll specifically attach music to it so that I can utilize that music as motivation later. So I completely get that. And I love that. I love that quote of yours now.
Yeah, that's brilliant too. I like that idea of listening to music just to, because there's a few songs I have that take me somewhere. I like that
Yes.
idea and trying to like make that tangible. So
I avoid those ones that are too powerful.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I got our next clip set up, and
Yes.
you're going to see kind of a similar theme in all of these. So this is Arcane. Now, I got to ask you. Actually, I'll quickly say I've not watched Arcane. It's on my list. So I have not much experience with it. What's
Okay.
your experience with it, history, and why was this something on your radar?
So Robert Bob Waxwell is probably the greatest writer of all time. And he is on a team, so it's his whole team that really does this. But I would sit back and I think that the YouTube culture would agree with me, but I would put him against every writer and philosopher that I know, and sit back and claim that he is the best one you're going to have. And he wrote the show BoJack Horseman. Now,
Nice.
BoJack Horseman is a very heavy show. It is one of those that is very challenging to get through. There is a lot of heavy themes that kind of go along with that. However, it is, in my opinion, the best written show you are ever going to find. So I bring that up to say that Arcane is my all-time favorite show, but I think the second best written show ever. Like Bluey's got a whole following more so than Arcane, and I think that's because it took people by surprise for what it was. But overall, Arcane is, in my opinion, the best show. And I could do a bit by bit breakdown and figure that out scientifically. But no, this is absolutely one that you really should watch. There's so much depth and subtext packed into it. It's a video game show, so it was on my radar before it came out. But I didn't have anything particularly that like drew me into the show. I'm not a League of Legends player. After the show came out, I still tried to get into League of Legends. And of course, all of their like characters from the show were behind paywalls because they were going to make bank on that. So I couldn't get attached to the game. But this is probably the best show you're ever going to watch.
Awesome. That's a good selling point. I'm wondering if either before or after, if you kind of want to give us some context.
Yeah, let's do after.
Okay, perfect. All right, sounds good. So
spoiler alert for after.
Perfect.
Powder? Vi? Oh, Powder! I'm so sorry, Powder. I tried to come back. I promise I did, but I got arrested. Marcus, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I never thought I'd see you again. Are you real? Yes, of course. It's me, Vi. Your sister. I'm here. I'm right here. Things changed when you left. I changed. I know. Pow, I know. You did what you had to do to survive. Me too. It's okay. What matters is we're together.
I'm trying to remember that we're on podcasts. I'm trying not to cry in public. So, for each of these clips.
Yeah. Oh, not knowing anything. I mean, it's a powerful scene.
Yeah. So I know that you asked me to give context, but knowing you haven't seen it, I'm like, oh geez.
Okay,
I really but basically to put it straight, they're sisters and they got separated years and years ago. Try not to give too much away.
Yeah.
But the one with the blue hair, her name was Powder. She was younger. She ended up causing pretty much all of her friends and family to die, or I guess her second family. And she was so consumed with guilt and shame and trauma and all of that that she ended up completely covering up who she was with another persona. So if you would have kept playing that, you would have seen that the enforcer, the cop who was pulling up, ends up calling her Jinx, which is essentially her villain name. But it is essentially her second self who's been so poisoned partially by the bad guy, but also like completely boxes in her old self. And so what's powerful about this scene is not the relationship between between Vi and Powder. It's the relationship between Powder and Jinx. It's the fact, and you will see this throughout the show, both in terms of spectacle, but also in terms of everything else, that it is a battle between Powder and Jinx, is a battle between her old and new self, is a battle between the two sides of herself, one that is just there to cause destruction and mayhem and be chaotic and crazy, because if she does all of this stuff, if she plays into being the villain, she doesn't have to feel anything, versus Powder, who's a child who was left alone, abandoned, and to navigate the world by herself.
Yeah.
So this is one of the many scenes where it's her past against her future, which ends up being the climax of the entire show.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That brings so much more depth to this scene, because it's one thing I thought of when I was watching this is having that person to go through like the struggles with you, help you pull me out. What tugged at my heart was when my parents separated. I was early 20s and it was a really bad divorce, really ugly. And I was at a church, and it was where my family used to go. And I was just like, I just had this feeling wash over me. I'm like, this is where my family used to be whole. And I was so like, I felt so sad. I was tears in my eyes. I'm like, I need anyone just to stop and say even if it's just like, excuse me, I'd be like, I can't do it. Like just anything. And everybody passed me by, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm leaving. And I went to turn, and one of my friends came in, and he came right over to me, didn't know what's going on. And he just gave me a hug.
Yeah.
And I was just turned into melt. I was just like, I need this. And he's like, come on, let's go hang out. And it was just like having somebody like that just to be there.
And, the mind is an incredibly volatile and yet incredibly impressive thing. The way that it's able to track memories, create symbols, all of that type of stuff is just fascinating. And the rewiring that needs to be done with trauma, speaking of older quotes, they say that you cannot heal in the same place you were damaged. And I very much feel that. And I never walked, I tried to walk away from the place I was damaged, but I never made it far enough. And if I had decided I'm going to go to the other side of the planet, I would have found the peace and prosperity that I needed to find. Now, on the flip side, I very much am developing the things I'm developing as a response to my pain, to my trauma. And I am, for me, I will sit back and I'll say, hey, I had to go through what I went through in order for me to develop this stuff. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, this is still me. Could I
Yeah.
have gotten through this without? I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm utilizing my pain as a way I'm utilizing my goals as a way to compensate for my pain, and I'm utilizing my pain as a way to reach my goals.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting
Hmm.
concept for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of people who never know what to say in those situations, and it
Right.
is exhausting.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if this is a good parallel. You'll have to tell me. Um, One thing I think about, kind of some of the reasons why I do some of the things I do. So there's this animated movie with Batman. I don't know which one it was, but
Okay.
there's a scene he's fighting Deathstroke,
Okay.
and he's, they're on a train. Deathstroke gets ready to shoot. Batman just rushes him and takes two shots.
Yeah.
And Deadshot goes, I've never seen anyone try to stop bullets by running into them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Batman takes him out, knocks him down. And then afterwards, Alfred is patching Bruce up. And he's sitting looking at the picture of his family, his parents. And he goes, Alfred, my whole life, I've been just trying to stop those two bullets.
Mm-hmm.
And just this idea, like, what drives him is that pain.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's driven me a lot of, like, I've felt such pain. I want to try to reduce it in other people.
There is another animated film, Mask of the Phantasm, and it is where he falls in love with somebody. Like, he's known to be this bachelor,
Yeah.
but like it's one of his few big relationships. And he goes to his parents' graves and he apologizes for possibly giving up the mission in exchange for this. And it's interesting because Andrea kind of teaches him a new way to commune with his parents beyond the grave because her mother's passed on.
Yeah.
But then when her dad is killed, she essentially becomes her own version of Batman. And so it's those two struggle to overcome the old, but also not even sure if they can be forgiven for moving forward. And it's one of those things to where, talking about your parents' divorce, right? I mean, I think that it's really easy. I think that everyone sees their own life through their own lens.
Yes.
Easy to carry a lot of shame and guilt for things that are so beyond your control. And I think that one of those things is that you can always blame somebody else.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that blame is there to protect yourself more than anything else, because that's what'll kill you. And forgiving somebody else is one thing, but forgiving them is only the door to forgiving yourself. And forgiving yourself is only the door to rewire your mind. And rewiring your mind is the door to finding a way to live forward. And living forward, for people who get stuck in that loop, I mean, it is Groundhog Day in the worst possible way, because it'll kill you. I mean, I'd be willing to place a lot of bets that the majority of suicides come from people who are stuck in the loop.
Thanks again for listening. This was part 1 of 2. We'll see you on Saturday.